I was 32 years old when I watched my father hand my brother the deed to my apartment. Not just any apartment, my apartment, the one I'd spent 5 years renovating with my own hands and money, the one I'd saved from foreclosure with $30,000 of my life savings, the one my parents had promised would someday be mine. And there it was, being gifted to my twin brother Connor at his engagement party like it had never been mine at all. The room erupted in applause while I stood frozen, a half-empty champagne glass trembling in my hand, realizing that in my family's eyes, I had always been and would always be nothing more than an afterthought. My name is Avery, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about an apartment. It's about discovering how far a person can be pushed before they finally push back. From our earliest memories, Connor and I might have shared the same birthday, the same DNA, and the same childhood home, but we existed in completely different universes when it came to our parents' affection. I still remember my 10th birthday. While Connor received a shiny new bike with his name custom painted on the frame, I got a practical set of educational books from the clearance section. When he brought home B- grades, my parents would celebrate with dinner out. When I made the honor roll, they'd nod and say, "That's nice, Avery," before turning back to whatever Connor was doing. The message was carved into the foundation of my childhood. Connor mattered. I was just there. By 27, I'd built a decent life for myself despite carrying the invisible weight of being the lesser-loved child. I had a marketing job downtown that I was good at. I had a tiny apartment far from work that ate up hours of my day commuting. And I had the constant, quiet hope that someday my parents might see me, really see me, as worthy of the same love they gave my brother. That's when my parents made what seemed like their first genuine gesture toward me. They offered me their apartment. Well, not exactly offered. They wanted me to rent it from them at 3/4 the market rate. The place had belonged to my dad's grandmother, and he'd inherited it years back. "Avery, we've been thinking," my mom said during one of our rare family dinners, her voice carrying that tone she used when she thought she was being generous. "You could live in Grandma's old place. We'll only charge you 3/4 of what you'd pay anywhere else in the neighborhood." Hope flickered in my chest. Was this finally it? Some recognition of my existence, my needs? I should have known better. In my family, nothing came without strings attached. The apartment was perfectly located, walking distance from my office. But when I first stepped inside, my stomach dropped. The floor squished beneath my feet, covered in decades-old carpet that released puffs of dust with each step. The walls were painted a sickly yellow that made everything look diseased. The bathroom was crumbling, tiles missing like bad teeth, and the kitchen looked preserved from the 1970s, complete with appliances that made concerning noises when turned on. Standing in that musty living room, I felt the familiar weight of disappointment. This wasn't a gift, it was an afterthought, a space they couldn't be bothered to maintain, now being passed off as generosity. But I took it anyway. The location was perfect, and somewhere deep inside me lived that desperate child still seeking approval. What followed was 5 years of transformation, not just of the apartment, but of me. Every paycheck, I'd set aside money for improvements. I painted over those jaundiced walls with warm colors that made the space feel alive. I tore up that disgusting carpet with my own hands, saving for 6 months to install beautiful laminate flooring throughout. The plumbing was a disaster waiting to happen. Half the pipes leaked, water damage creeping through the walls like a disease. I hired a professional who shook his head in disbelief. "You're lucky you caught this when you did." Another year and the structural damage would have been catastrophic. One by one, the appliances failed. The dishwasher flooded my new floors. The refrigerator died during a heat wave, forcing me to throw out everything inside. The ancient stove heated unevenly and occasionally shot concerning sparks. I replaced them all, watching my credit card statements grow with each necessary purchase. I even had all the electrical outlets replaced when an electrician informed every improvement, every repair, every single thing came out of my pocket. My parents would stop by occasionally for what my dad liked to call checking on their investment. They'd walk around nodding approvingly at all the work I'd done. "You're really fixing this place up nice," my mom would say, running her hand along the freshly painted walls. "It's going to be worth so much more when you're done." I didn't mind the work. Actually, I loved it. For the first time in my life, I had something that felt like mine. Even though I was paying rent, even though technically it belonged to my parents, I was creating a home. I was building something beautiful with my own hands. Then, about a year ago, everything changed. I was 31, settled into my routine, feeling pretty good about my life. I had my job, my apartment, my independence. That's when my parents showed up at my door with grave expressions that made my stomach clench before they even spoke. "Avery, we need to talk," my dad said as they sat down on my couch, the couch I'd bought and paid for. His face carried the weight of bad news. "What's up?" I asked, though something deep inside was already warning me to brace for impact. "We're in trouble with the mortgage on this place," my mom said, her voice heavy with what seemed like genuine distress. "We owe the bank $30,000 and we can't pay it. The bank is threatening to foreclose." I felt my coffee mug slip slightly in my hands. "So, what are you asking me to do?" "We need you to pay the $30,000, my dad said, his words hitting me like a physical blow. "We know it's a lot, but think of it as an investment. This apartment will be yours someday anyway." "Will be mine?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," my mom said, reaching over to squeeze my hand with unfamiliar tenderness. "You're our daughter. We're not going to leave you with nothing. Connor will get the house when we're gone, and you'll get this apartment. You've put so much work into it already." I had some savings built up from years of working and living relatively cheaply. $30,000 was most of what I had, but if it meant I'd eventually own the place I'd been renovating and improving for years, it seemed like a reasonable investment. "You promise this apartment will be mine?" I asked, needing to hear it one more time. "Absolutely," my dad said, looking me straight in the eye with a sincerity I rarely saw directed at me. "We're not going to forget everything you've done for this place. You've made it your home." So I did it. I transferred $30,000, nearly everything I had, to my parents to pay off their mortgage debt. I trusted them completely. They were my parents, after all. Why would they lie to me about something this important? Life continued normally after that. I kept living in the apartment, kept paying rent, kept maintaining and improving the place. My parents never mentioned the money again, and I assumed that meant everything was taken care of. The apartment would be mine eventually, and I'd already invested so much in it that it felt like mine anyway. 2 weeks ago, Connor called me at work. I was finishing up some paperwork when my phone rang, and I could hear the excitement in his voice immediately. "Hey, Avery, I've got some great news," he said, practically bouncing through the phone. "Claire and I are getting engaged. We're having the engagement party in 2 weeks at her parents' house. You're invited, obviously." Claire had been Connor's girlfriend for about 2 years. I knew her well. We'd all gone to the same high school. She was smart, funny, down to earth, a genuinely good person. "Connor, that's amazing," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything with my parents, I genuinely cared about my brother. "Claire's great. You two are perfect for each other." "Thanks, sis. It means a lot to hear you say that. Mom and Dad are over the moon about it." Of course they were. Their golden boy was getting married to a nice girl from a good family. This was probably the best news they'd gotten all year. The engagement party was at Claire's parents' house in a nice suburb about 30 minutes from downtown. When I arrived, the place was already buzzing with about 40 people. Claire's family, old high school friends, relatives I recognized from various family gatherings over the years. "Avery!" Claire rushed over to me as soon as I walked in, radiant with happiness. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Congratulations," I said, giving her a big hug. "I'm so happy for you and Connor." The party was going well. People were laughing, eating, drinking, sharing stories about the happy couple. I was actually having a good time, catching up with old friends and enjoying the celebration. Then, about an hour into the party, my father cleared his throat loudly and called for everyone's attention. "Excuse me, everyone," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The room quieted down, and all eyes turned to my father. He was standing in the center of the living room, my mom beside him, both beaming with pride. "Diane and I wanted to take a moment to say how proud we are of our son Connor," my dad continued. "He's always been such a wonderful boy, and seeing him so happy with Claire just fills our hearts with joy." People murmured their agreement, smiling and nodding. This was nice, I thought. A little sentimental, but nice. "We have a very special engagement gift for Connor," my dad said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Something that shows just how much we love him and how proud we are of the man he's become." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Connor. My brother's face lit up, but he didn't look surprised. Actually, he looked like he'd been expecting this. "Go ahead, son, open it up." Connor opened the envelope and pulled out some official-looking documents. He glanced at them quickly, then looked up at our parents with a huge smile. "Mom, Dad, this is incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. I can't believe you're doing this." "What is it?" someone called out from the crowd. My mom stepped forward, practically glowing with pride. "It's the deed to an apartment downtown. The one that Connor's sister has been living in for the past few years. We're giving it to Connor and Claire as a wedding gift." The room erupted in congratulations and applause. People were clapping, calling out their approval, telling Connor how lucky he was to have such generous parents. I felt like I'd been punched. The apartment. My apartment. The one I'd been paying rent on for 5 years. The one I'd completely renovated with my own money. The one I'd paid $30,000 to save from foreclosure just a year ago. The one my parents had promised would be mine someday. They were giving it to Connor. "This is such a wonderful gift," Claire was saying, looking at the documents in Connor's hands. "We're so grateful. We've been talking about finding our own place, and this is just perfect." "Connor deserves it," my dad said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "He's getting married, starting a family soon, hopefully. He and Claire need their own place to build their life together." I looked at my parents, desperately hoping to catch their eye, hoping for some kind of explanation or apology. But when they saw me looking, they just smiled and shrugged, like this was the most natural thing in the world. That's when my Aunt Barbara, my mom's sister, spoke up from across the room. "Wait a minute," she said, her voice cutting through the celebrations. "What about Avery? Hasn't she been living in that apartment for years?" The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at me, then at my parents. I felt my face burning with humiliation, but I couldn't speak past the knot in my throat. My dad shrugged casually. "Avery will have to move out, of course. We've been letting her live there for 5 years now. I think that's been generous enough. She's an adult. She can find her own place. There are plenty of apartments for rent in the city." I could have told everyone the truth right then and there. I could have stood up and announced that I hadn't been living there for free like my parents were making it sound. I could have explained that I paid rent every single month, that I'd renovated the entire place with my own money, that I'd given them $30,000 just last year to save that apartment from foreclosure. But I didn't. A lifetime of conditioning to stay quiet, to not make waves, kept me frozen in place. I just sat there for another 30 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I quietly got up, grabbed my purse, and walked out of Claire's parents' house. Nobody even noticed me leaving. The drive back to the apartment, no, not my apartment anymore, was a blur of streetlights smeared by tears I refused to acknowledge. When I got home, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat on my couch. The couch I bought with my own money, staring at the walls I painted myself. Everything in this place represented years of my life, my money, my work. And now Connor was just going to get it all handed to him on a silver platter? That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from Connor. Move out immediately. You have 2 days. 2 days! Not even a week! Not even a conversation! Just a cold text message ordering me out of the home I'd created? I stared at those words for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt and shock were still there, but rising through them came something new and unfamiliar. Rage, white-hot and clarifying. They thought they could just throw me out like garbage? They thought they could steal $30,000 from me, humiliate me in front of everyone, then kick me out with 2 days' notice? But here's the thing about pushing someone too far. Eventually, they push back. I called my friend Olivia, who'd been my friend since college and was one of the few people who knew how difficult my family could be. "Olivia, I need a favor," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Can I stay with you for a while? I need to find a new place to live." "Of course, but what happened? Are you okay?" "I'll explain later. I just need somewhere to go for a few days while I figure things out." "Actually, you know what? My brother Ryan moved to Europe for work last month. His house is sitting empty. You could stay there as long as you need to. No rent, just pay the utility." I called the service company and asked them to come over first thing in the morning. "I need you to disconnect and remove all the appliances," I told them. "The dishwasher, the refrigerator, the stove, everything. I also need you to remove all the electrical outlets and the plumbing fixtures." The guy on the phone sounded confused. "Ma'am, that's gonna leave the place pretty bare." "That's exactly what I want," I said, a new strength in my voice. "I bought all of those things with my own money, so I'm taking them with me." The next day, the crew showed up early and got to work. They disconnected the dishwasher, unplugged the refrigerator, removed the stove. They took out every single electrical outlet I'd installed, removed the new bathroom fixtures, even took the nice light fixtures I'd bought to replace the old ones. But the pièce de résistance, the laminate flooring, that took the longest. They had to pull it up piece by piece, but I'd kept the original receipt, so I knew exactly what I'd paid for it. Every single plank was mine. Watching them strip the place down was oddly therapeutic. With each item they removed, I felt a little bit of my power returning. This wasn't just petty revenge. It was reclamation, taking back what was rightfully mine. That evening, I called a moving company. They came and loaded up all my furniture, all the appliances, all the flooring materials, everything. Olivia met me at Ryan's house with the keys, and we spent the night moving everything in. When we were done, I took the apartment keys and put them in an envelope. I wrote a short note. "I've moved out as requested. The apartment is yours now." I sent it by courier to my parents' house. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. It was my mom, then my dad, then Connor, calling over and over again. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text messages started coming in. "You had no right to do that. We're calling the police. You can't just destroy our property. You're going to pay for this." Finally, around noon, I answered when my mom called. "Avery, what the hell did you do?" she screamed as soon as I picked up. "I moved out like you asked," I said calmly. "You destroyed the apartment! You took everything, the outlets, the plumbing, the floors. It's completely gutted." "I took what belonged to me," I said. "I bought all of those things with my own money. I have the receipts to prove it." You're being vindictive. This is so petty. We could have you arrested. Go ahead, I said. Call the police. Tell them I took my own property when I moved out. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about how you tricked me out of $30,000 and then kicked me out with 2 days' notice. There was silence on the other end of the line. Avery, you shouldn't have done this, my mom said finally, her voice quieter now. Look, we can work something out. Maybe we can count that $30,000 as a wedding gift for Connor. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A wedding gift. They were trying to retroactively justify stealing my money by calling it a gift to my brother. You're all liars, I said. You lied to me. You used me, and you threw me away when it was convenient. So I'm treating you exactly like you deserve to be treated. Avery, please. Oh, and Mom, you haven't seen anything yet. I've got another surprise coming for you. Then I hung up. The next morning, I called a tow truck company. I had one more card to play. I need you to pick up a car from this address, I told them, giving them my parents' house number. It's a blue Honda Civic, license plate KM2000. I'm the legal owner, and I have all the paperwork to prove it. The car was something I'd almost forgotten about in all this mess. 3 years ago, when my parents started having money troubles, they'd asked if they could borrow it, just temporarily while they figured out their transportation situation. That was 3 years ago. I'd bought myself a new car and let them keep using the Honda. I was still paying the insurance on it, still the legal owner, but I'd basically given it to them. Another one of my many generous gestures. The tow truck driver called me an hour later. Ma'am, I've got your car. There was an older couple who came out screaming about it, but I showed them the paperwork. They couldn't do anything about it. Perfect, I said. Bring it to this address. 15 minutes after the car arrived, my phone exploded with calls again. I didn't answer any of them, but the text messages were something else. You can't just steal our car. We need that car for work. We don't have money for another car. You're being a terrible person. My brother sent me the best one. You're a complete don't bother coming to my wedding. That one actually made me laugh out loud, as if I'd ever want to celebrate with them again. I blocked all their numbers after that. I was done listening to their complaints. 3 weeks later, I put the Honda up for sale. It was in great condition and sold within a week for $12,000. When I deposited that check, I smiled for the first time in months. $12,000. Not quite the $30,000 they'd stolen from me, but it was something. It was a start. About 2 weeks after that, I got a call from Claire. I was surprised to hear from her, but I answered. Hey Claire, what's up? Avery, I really need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere? We met at a coffee shop downtown. Claire looked tired, stressed. Nothing like the glowing bride-to-be I had seen at the engagement party. Your parents told me everything, she said as soon as we sat down, about what happened with the apartment. They're blaming everything on you, saying you're being vindictive and trying to destroy their family. And what did Connor say? Claire's face darkened. He agreed with them completely. He called you greedy and vindictive. He said you were just trying to cause trouble because you were jealous of our relationship. And what do you think about all that? Avery, I knew you lived in your parents' apartment. I've been there to visit you plenty of times over the years. But I had no idea you paid $30,000 to save it from foreclosure. I had no idea you'd renovated the entire place with your own money, that you'd been paying rent all these years. Well, now you do, I said. I can't marry him, Claire said suddenly. I can't marry into a family that would do something like this. And Connor, the way he talked about you, his own sister, it made me sick. Claire, you need to make your own decision about this. Don't let my situation influence what you want to do with your life. It's not just your situation, she said. It's how they all handled it. Your parents lied to you, stole from you, and then acted like you were the problem. And Connor just went along with it. He didn't even try to make it right. A month later, my Aunt Barbara called to tell me Claire had broken off the engagement. The wedding was off. Your parents and Connor are furious, she said. They're blaming you, saying you poisoned her against them. Of course they are, I said. God forbid they take responsibility for their own actions. 6 months have passed since then. I'm still living in Ryan's house, keeping it clean and paying the utilities. I've been saving money like crazy without rent payments, already putting away enough for a down payment on my own place. My parents and Connor have tried to contact me through other relatives a few times, but I've made it clear that I'm not interested in reconciliation. They made their choice when they decided to lie to me and steal from me. I've made mine. Do I miss having a family? Sometimes, but I don't miss the constant feeling of being second best. I don't miss being used and manipulated. I don't miss being treated like I don't matter. I think of Connor's broken engagement as a bonus. I didn't plan for that to happen, but I'm not sorry it did. Claire deserved better than to marry into a family of liars and thieves. And Connor deserved to lose something he cared about, just like I did. Am I angry? Not really. Not anymore. I'm disappointed, sure. I'm hurt by how easily they threw me away. But mostly, I'm just relieved to be free of them. They can keep their lies and their favoritism and their games. I've got my own life to build now, and I'm going to make sure it's a good one. Thanks for listening. And if you liked this story, share it with others who might need to hear that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when the people who should love you become the ones who hurt you most. Remember, family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down.